She discovered him near death with his twins, unaware he was the Alpha King. His sudden disappearance left the kingdom in turmoil, and whispers of his death spread like wildfire. His family had been powerful, a force that ruled with both strength and fear. But Elias had no heir to take his place. The throne of Varith was empty, and the kingdom seemed to wither with each passing day. In a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom, a young healer named Seraphine lived a peaceful life. She was known for her gentle hands and kind heart, always helping the sick and wounded. Her small cottage was hidden deep in the forest, far from the troubles of the world. But on one fateful evening, her peaceful life was about to be shattered. Seraphine had been collecting herbs when she noticed something strange in the distance. A figure, barely standing, stumbled through the trees, clutching two infants to his chest. His clothes were torn, his skin pale, and blood dripped from his wounds. As the figure collapsed to the ground, the babies let out soft cries. Seraphine rushed to his side, her heart racing. She knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she touched his forehead. He was burning with fever. His breathing was shallow and his body was cold. But there was something about him, something that made Seraphine's heart skip a beat. His aura was heavy, almost ancient, as though he carried a great burden. The babies, twins no older than a few months, seemed unaffected by the storm that had swept through the forest. They gazed at Seraphine with wide, trusting eyes. Their faces were soft, angelic, but their eyes. There was something powerful about their gaze. It made Seraphine pause for a moment, as though they saw through her very soul. "Who are you?" she whispered, but the man could not answer. His lips barely moved and his eyes flickered before closing. Without thinking, Seraphine scooped up the twins and placed them gently on the ground beside the man. She tore strips from her own clothes, wrapping them tightly around his wounds. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This man, whoever he was, needed help, and she was the only one around for miles. Her heart pounded as she worked quickly, binding his wounds as best as she could. The storm raged around them, but Seraphine was focused. Her thoughts were clear, and she was determined to save him. She had saved many before, but something about this felt different. He was no ordinary traveler. The hours passed slowly, and by the time the storm had passed, the man's breathing became less ragged. His fever did not break, but he was alive. Seraphine had done all she could for now, but she knew this man was no simple wanderer. He was someone important, someone whose presence made the forest feel alive in a way she had never known. Seraphine lay down beside him, her mind racing. The twins were calm, though their eyes never left her. They seemed content to be near her, as if they knew she would protect them. She thought about the king's disappearance, about the rumors that had filled the air. Some said he had died in battle, others whispered that he had been cursed, hidden away in some dark corner of the kingdom. "Who are you?" Seraphine repeated softly, looking at the man's pale face. "What brought you here?" Her question was met with silence, but she could feel an answer coming. She did not know why, but she could sense that this man, this stranger, held the key to everything. Perhaps, in the darkest of times, the king's blood had been sent to her for a reason. But the thought was too large, too wild for her to hold on to. For now, all she could do was wait. As she drifted into sleep, her dreams were filled with shadows. A voice, deep and haunting, called out to her, but she could not understand the words. It felt as though something was trying to reach her from the depths of the past, something tied to the king's bloodline, and she was helpless to stop it. The next day, Seraphine woke to find the man still unconscious, but his fever had broken. His breathing was steadier, and though he was still pale, the signs of life returned to his face. The twins, too, were peaceful, their tiny forms still as they slept beside him. Seraphine sat by the fire, staring into the flames, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in her mind. Who was this man? Why had he come to her? And more importantly, who were the babies? There was something about them that unsettled her. They were so small, so innocent, yet they felt older than the world itself. The twins were tied to something larger, something dangerous. The man began to stir, his fingers twitching. Seraphine's heart skipped. She quickly rushed to his side, her hands hovering above his chest. He groaned softly and his eyes opened, though they seemed unfocused at first. "Where am I?" he muttered, his voice hoarse and weak. The sound of it sent a chill through Seraphine. There was a power in his words, though faint. He looked around, his gaze falling on the twins. "The children, they're safe." His voice was barely a whisper, but the urgency in it was clear. "They're fine," Seraphine replied softly, though she could feel the tension in his words. He seemed so familiar, and yet she didn't know him. "You're safe for now. I've been tending to your wounds." His eyes fixed on her then, locking with hers, and for a moment it felt as though time itself had stopped. There was something in his gaze, something ancient and knowing, as though he could see through her very soul. Seraphine felt her breath catch in her throat. He was no ordinary man. "Who are you?" she asked again, but this time her voice trembled. The man hesitated. His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment she saw a flash of recognition in them. But before he could answer, a distant, almost imperceptible sound reached their ears. The wind carried a strange, eerie whisper. It was not the wind at all, but something else, something dark and dangerous, a warning. The man's face darkened, and for the first time, Seraphine saw fear in his eyes. "You need to leave," he said urgently, his voice filled with a power that sent a shiver down her spine. "You're not safe here anymore." Seraphine's heart raced. What was happening? Who was this man? And why had he come into her life at this moment? She didn't understand, but she knew one thing: her life would never be the same again. Cliffhanger. As the man's warning lingered in the air, a sudden crash sounded from outside. Seraphine's eyes widened. Something or someone was coming. And she wasn't prepared for what would come next. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with unease. Seraphine stood frozen at the door of her small cottage, her breath shallow, listening to the sound of the crash that had come from the forest. She glanced back at the man lying on the bed, his face pale and drawn. His eyes were now closed, and his breathing, though steadier, still had an unnatural quietness to it. The babies, too, were still, eerily still, as if they sensed the danger approaching. Their tiny faces were serene, yet their eyes seemed too wise for their years. Seraphine had never felt so unsure in her life. She had cared for many, healed many, but this felt different. The man, whose name she still didn't know, had warned her of danger. And she couldn't shake the feeling that the twins, innocent as they appeared, were somehow at the center of it all. Her heart raced as she slowly moved toward the door, her feet hesitant on the wooden floor. The crash had come from the direction of the forest, where the trees grew thick and wild. There was something unnatural about the sound, something deep and ominous, as if the forest itself was shaking under the weight of an unseen force. "Stay here," she whispered to the man, though he couldn't hear her. She turned to glance at the twins one last time before stepping outside, her eyes scanning the darkened woods. The moment Seraphine stepped into the cool night air, a chill ran down her spine. The wind had stopped and the silence was suffocating. The only sound was the steady beat of her heart in her chest, the only light coming from the pale moon above. She gripped the edge of the doorframe, her fingers trembling as her mind raced. What was out there? Who was coming? Before she could take another step, a low growl rumbled in the distance, followed by the sound of something large moving through the underbrush. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The growl came again, closer this time, like an animal, but not quite. It was deeper, more menacing. "Stay inside," she muttered to herself, but she couldn't leave the man unguarded. She had to know what was out there. She stepped away from the door, her footsteps light but swift, moving toward the edge of the forest. The dark trees loomed like silent sentinels, and Seraphine felt the weight of their ancient presence pressing down on her. She had lived in this forest for as long as she could remember, but tonight it felt different. It felt alive in a way she didn't understand. Her breath came in short gasps as she pushed her way deeper into the woods. She paused, listening again. The growl was louder now, almost too close, and then out of the darkness a figure emerged. It was tall, its form shadowed by the trees, its eyes glowing a faint, unnatural green. Seraphine's heart stopped. She stumbled backward, her foot catching on a root. The figure stepped forward, its movement slow, deliberate. The glow from its eyes intensified, casting an eerie light on the forest floor. It wasn't a human. It wasn't an animal either. The creature was something between the two, its body sleek and muscular, its face twisted in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. Its fur was dark, almost black, and its fangs gleamed in the moonlight. "What are you?" Seraphine whispered, her voice trembling. The creature did not answer, but instead it took another step forward, its eyes locked on her. She could feel the weight of its gaze like a physical presence. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She wasn't going to run. She couldn't leave the man, not now. Suddenly, the creature stopped. It sniffed the air, and for a brief moment Seraphine thought it had lost interest in her. But then its eyes flickered and it turned its gaze toward the cottage behind her. She followed its line of sight, her stomach sinking. The man, the twins. "No," Seraphine whispered. "Stay away from them." The creature seemed to sense her fear, its lips pulling back into a snarl. It stepped forward again, its movements predatory, as if it were a hunter and she its prey. Seraphine's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the danger in the air, the same suffocating presence that had settled in her bones the moment she'd laid eyes on the man. She didn't have time to think. Without another word, she turned and ran back toward the cottage. Her feet pounded the earth, her heart racing as the creature's growls echoed behind her. She could hear it following, its pace quickening. She had to get to the man, to the twins. She couldn't let them be harmed. The cottage was just ahead, but before she could reach it, she felt a sharp pain in her side as something heavy struck her. The wind was knocked out of her as she hit the ground, her vision spinning. She gasped for air, but before she could get up, she felt a presence looming over her. The creature stood just feet away, its eyes glowing like twin lanterns in the dark. "Get away from her," a voice shouted from behind her. The creature paused. Seraphine looked up in shock as the man, the one she had thought unconscious, stepped into view. He stood tall, his body trembling with the effort, but there was a dangerous energy around him, an aura that seemed to fill the air with power. "You're not going near her," the man growled, his voice rough but filled with authority. Seraphine's heart leaped as she recognized the strength in his voice. This was no ordinary man. The energy that radiated from him was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It was ancient, it was powerful, and it was filled with a quiet, controlled rage. The creature seemed to recognize it too, stepping back slightly, but still watching them with its glowing eyes. The man took a step forward, his movements slow but deliberate, and as he did, the air around him seemed to change. The temperature dropped, and a low hum filled the air, like the sound of a storm about to break. "You have no place here," the man said, his words cold and commanding. "Leave now before I make you." For a moment the creature hesitated. Then, with a final growl, it turned and vanished back into the forest, its eyes fading into the darkness. Seraphine lay there, her chest heaving, her body trembling from the close call. The man knelt beside her, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now, though still filled with an intensity she couldn't ignore. I'm fine," Seraphine said, her voice shaky. "But what was that thing?" The man's expression darkened. "A creature of the old world, it serves someone who doesn't want me alive. But why? Why would it attack us?" "The twins," he said, his voice filled with something unreadable. "They're not just children, they're the key to everything. And as long as they live, there will be those who want them dead." Seraphine's heart sank as she looked at the twins, still resting peacefully in the cottage. She didn't understand. She didn't know what it all meant. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just changed forever. Cliffhanger. As Seraphine looked back at the man, she saw something flicker in his eyes, a dark, hidden secret. And just as she was about to ask him more, the wind shifted. There was another presence in the air. Something darker, something more dangerous. The real battle was only just beginning. The night was quiet again, but Seraphine couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She had returned to the cottage after the creature had disappeared into the woods. The man, Elias, she had learned his name in the moments after the creature fled, had carried her inside, his strength surprising given the state he had been in only hours before. The twins, too, remained untouched, their eyes as calm as ever, though Seraphine couldn't ignore the weight of their stare. It was as if they knew more than anyone had a right to. Elias had collapsed onto the chair near the fire, his breath labored but steady. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the small room. Seraphine stood in the doorway, watching him, her heart still racing from the encounter in the forest. The man's presence had changed everything. He wasn't just some injured wanderer, he was a force. Something ancient and powerful, something far beyond her understanding. "Are you all right?" Seraphine asked quietly, breaking the silence. Elias didn't respond right away. His gaze lingered on the fire, his face shadowed in thought. He looked tired, his strength draining again. "I've been better," he said, his voice rough, but his eyes, those deep, stormy eyes, were filled with something else now. Pain, regret. "Who were they, those creatures?" Seraphine asked, taking a cautious step forward. "And why are they after you?" Elias let out a long breath, his gaze never leaving the fire. "They are servants of a darker power, and they want the twins. They want to end the bloodline." Seraphine frowned, confused. "The twins? What do they have to do with anything?" Elias turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since the battle. "They are my children, the last of the royal bloodline of Varith." Seraphine's breath caught. The last of the royal bloodline, the Alpha King's bloodline. She had heard stories, whispers in the village, of a king who ruled with great power, only to disappear without a trace. Could it be that Elias was the man everyone had forgotten? Could he truly be the Alpha King? You're the king," she whispered, almost afraid to ask. "But how?" Elias closed his eyes. "I was once the Alpha King of Varith, but not anymore. I was betrayed, cursed by those who feared my power. I was left to die, alone, hidden away. And now, because of that curse, I can never return to the throne." Seraphine's mind raced. She tried to make sense of what he was saying. Betrayal, curses. A hidden king now with his children, both of whom were somehow tied to this dark power. The weight of it all felt too much to bear, too strange to understand. "But why? Why did you come here?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why did you end up in my cottage?" Elias let out a deep sigh. "I had no choice. The curse that binds me also keeps me weak, but it is breaking. The longer I stay hidden, the stronger I become. The twins. They are the key. They carry the blood of Varith, the blood of the king, and they are the only ones who can break the curse. But there are those who would kill them to ensure that never happens." Seraphine's heart twisted as she looked at the sleeping twins. They were so small, so innocent. She couldn't understand why anyone would want to hurt them. They were just children. "But you want me to help you, don't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias nodded slowly. "I cannot do this alone. I need you." "You have the power within you, Seraphine. The blood of the old magic runs in your veins, too. You may not know it yet, but you are part of this, part of Varith. And if you want to save the kingdom, if you want to save the twins, you must help me." Seraphine took a step back, her heart pounding. She had never asked for any of this. She was just a healer, a simple woman living in a cottage far from the court and the politics of kings and queens. She wasn't part of any bloodline. She wasn't a warrior or a princess. She was just Seraphine. But something in Elias' words, something deep inside her, told her that it wasn't a choice. that the destiny of the twins, of Varith, and of the world itself was bound to her now. There was no going back. I don't know how to help you," she said softly, looking down at the floor. "I don't know anything about magic. I'm not like you." Elia's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You're more like me than you realize, Seraphine. The blood of the old kings flows in your veins just as it does in mine. That's why you can heal. That's why the creatures in the forest came after you. They sense it, and they'll keep coming until you understand your power." Seraphine felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had always known she was different, that there was something more to her than the simple life she led. But to think that she carried the blood of kings, of powerful rulers who had once held entire kingdoms in their hands, was too much to comprehend. "I'm not ready for this," she whispered. "I can't do it." "You don't have to do it alone," Elias said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm here, I will help you, but you must trust me, and you must learn to control the magic within you. The sooner you do, the sooner we can stop them from coming." Seraphine looked at the twins, who were still resting peacefully. She had a strange sense of comfort when she looked at them, though the danger that surrounded them was real. She didn't know if she could handle what Elias was asking of her. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't trained for battle or for ruling a kingdom. But there was something deep inside her that told her she had no choice. The stakes were too high. And if Elias was telling the truth, then the fate of Varith, of these children, and perhaps the world itself, rested in her hands. "I'll try," she said, her voice steady but unsure. "I'll help you, but I don't know how much I can do." Elias smiled faintly, his eyes filled with both gratitude and something else, something darker. "That's all I ask." The night grew quieter as the fire burned low. Seraphine sat beside Elias, her mind racing with thoughts of magic, curses, and the powerful blood that ran through her veins. She wasn't ready for this, but there was no turning back. She had made her choice. She would help Elias and she would protect the twins. No matter the cost. But as the night stretched on, a feeling of dread settled over her. Something was coming. She could feel it in the air, a shift, a change, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elias seemed to sense it too. He looked toward the window, his expression darkening. The twins stirred slightly in their sleep, and for a moment Seraphine thought she saw something flicker in their eyes, a warning. "There's no time," Elias said, his voice urgent. "They're coming." Seraphine's heart stopped. She knew it wasn't just the creatures from the forest. It was something worse, something darker, and it was too close. Cliffhanger, just as Elias stood to gather the twins, the door to the cottage burst open with a deafening crash. The darkness outside poured in, and Seraphine knew, whatever was coming, it was no longer a matter of survival. It was a battle for everything. The door to the cottage shattered inward with a force that left Seraphine frozen in place. Splinters of wood flew across the room, the thick darkness from outside pouring into the small, dimly lit space. The fire crackled in protest, but the room felt colder than ever. Seraphine's heart pounded in her chest, and her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know who or what had come, but she knew it was bad, worse than anything she had ever faced. Elias sprang to his feet, his body trembling with a renewed power that seemed to pulse through the air. The twins, still asleep on the bed, stirred only slightly, but Seraphine noticed their little hands curl into fists as if sensing the danger. "Stay back," Elias shouted, his voice sharp, commanding. His eyes glowed faintly, a dark energy emanating from him that made Seraphine's skin crawl. Before she could react, shadows moved swiftly in the doorway, solidifying into shapes. The figures that emerged were not entirely human. They were cloaked, their features hidden beneath hoods, but their eyes shone with an unsettling, unnatural glow. Their presence filled the room, and Seraphine could feel the weight of their intent. They weren't here for a simple confrontation. They were here to destroy. Elias stepped forward, his expression fierce, every movement deliberate. He held his ground, but Seraphine could see the strain in his face. He was weakened, still recovering from his past battles, the curse that drained him with each passing day. "You shouldn't have come," Elias growled, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is my fight. Leave now or I will make you." The dark figures did not speak. They only stepped closer, their presence growing stronger. One of them, taller than the others, removed his hood, revealing a face twisted with anger and contempt. His eyes, pale as death, met Elias's. "You're still alive," the figure said, his voice cold and mocking. "We thought the curse would end you. But we see you're not so easily defeated." Elias' jaw tightened, and for a moment, Seraphine thought she saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for the twins. He knew what these creatures were capable of. He knew they would stop at nothing to see the royal bloodline erased. "What do you want with the children?" Elias demanded, his voice low but filled with authority. The tall figure smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "We want what belongs to us. The blood of the Alpha King is ours to control, and these children are the key to our master's return." Seraphine felt the blood drain from her face. Her gaze snapped to the twins, who were still lying on the bed, their eyes closed, unaware of the danger that loomed over them. They were just children. How could anyone want to hurt them? "No!" Seraphine shouted, stepping forward, but Elias' hand shot out, stopping her. "Stay back," he whispered, his voice strained. "They're not just ordinary beings. They're connected to the dark power that curses me, and if they are harmed—" Seraphine didn't need to hear more. She could see the terror in Elias' eyes. The twins were not just innocent children, they were something much more. They were the key to Elias' curse and the future of Varith itself. The tall figure laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder through the room. "You think you can protect them? You, a mere healer, a simple woman from the woods. You're out of your depth, girl." Seraphine's heart clenched at the insult, but she did not back down. She could feel something stirring inside her, something ancient and powerful. She didn't understand it, but she knew it was there. The magic that ran through her veins was waking, responding to the danger, to the curse that surrounded them all. The figure took another step forward, and before Elias could react, a sharp, cold wind swirled through the room, slamming the door shut behind the dark figures. The fire sputtered, its warmth suddenly gone. The room seemed to grow darker, colder, the shadows stretching like claws reaching for them. Elias' eyes burned with fury. He raised his hand, and the shadows trembled, but the figures did not falter. Instead, they raised their own hands, and the air around them crackled with dark energy. "I told you to leave," Elias snarled. "This is my battle, not yours." With a sudden, violent motion, the tall figure snapped his fingers, and the ground beneath them trembled. A wave of dark magic surged toward Elias, but he deflected it with a force that sent a shockwave through the cottage, knocking Seraphine to the ground. She gasped, scrambling to her feet. Elias was fighting with all his strength, but the dark figures weren't backing down. They were too powerful, too many. Seraphine could see that Elias was weakening, the curse draining him further with each strike. "Elias," Seraphine shouted, her voice desperate. "We need to fight back. We can't let them win." Elias' eyes flickered toward her, filled with pain. "I can't," he whispered, his voice strained. "The curse, it's too strong. I need you." Seraphine's heart thundered in her chest. She didn't know how to fight. She didn't know how to wield the power that Elias was asking her to use. But in that moment she realized something. The power wasn't just in Elias' blood. It was in hers, too. She could feel it now, the magic, the ancient force that flowed through her, that connected her to the old kings of Varith. The same magic that had healed wounds, that had kept her safe all these years, was the same magic that could protect the twins and end the curse. "Seraphine, please," Elias whispered, his voice barely audible. Without thinking, Seraphine closed her eyes, letting the magic flow through her. It was wild, untamed, but it was hers. It filled her, warming her from the inside out. She raised her hands, trembling, and for the first time she understood the magic that had always been within her. It was her birthright, and now it was time to use it. "By the blood of Varith I command you," Seraphine whispered, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Leave this place." A surge of energy erupted from her, bright and fierce, pushing the dark figures back. The shadows recoiled, hissing as if in pain. Elias looked up, his eyes wide with awe and disbelief. "Seraphine, you did it," he whispered. The dark figures faltered, their power weakening under the force of Seraphine's magic. The tall figure staggered back, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can defeat us?" he spat. "You are nothing but a puppet of the old world. We will return. The Alpha King will fall." Before Seraphine could respond, the figures retreated into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. The room grew still, the cold lifting, and the fire crackled back to life. Elias fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at Seraphine, his eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something deeper, something that could not be said in words. "You saved us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Seraphine nodded, though she still felt the weight of the battle in her bones. She didn't understand what had happened, but she knew one thing for certain. The magic was hers now, and with it she could save Elias. She could save the twins. She could save Varith. But as she looked at Elias, something flickered in her heart. The man who had been lost, the king who had been cursed, was no longer the broken figure he once was. He was stronger now, not just because of his bloodline, but because of the power that had come from their connection. Elias slowly rose to his feet, his hand reaching out toward her. "We're not done yet, Seraphine. This is only the beginning." Seraphine swallowed hard, feeling a deep sense of purpose settle within her. She nodded, her voice steady. "Then we'll face it together." Cliffhanger, as they turned to look at the twins who had fallen back into their peaceful slumber, a new sound filled the air. A distant howl. It was low, mournful, but filled with promise. Something was coming, something worse than before. And this time, they would not be able to hide.